All right, peace and blessings, brothers and sisters. Once again, this is the Cosmocentric Mystic. Wanting to talk to you and discuss a few things with you. I'm going to lay down the framework uh, in which I will discuss a book and different concepts coming out of a book. This book is called Yurugu. It is an African-centered critique of European cultural thought and structure. Um, And the reason why this is important is because this is one of the pivotal works of the conscious community of the Pan-African movement. And it is very, very key as far as going into a work and understanding its conception. And so this is for the most part, a book report. What brothers and sisters nowadays like to call knowledge. But in any college, university, it's a simple book report. And so this first video that I'm doing will discuss and define and describe the terms in the book, and then I'll move forward from there. So without further ado, let's get started. Okay, gonna wait a second and going to play from current slide and there. All right, so what we got, Yurugu is once again an African-centered critique of European cultural thought and structure. So these are the terms. The first term that we kind of have to come to grips with is this term asili. These are all Kiswahili words that Marimba Ani introduced to us so that she could explain certain concepts. So now the asili is something that is used repetitively throughout the work, and it is something that you have to kind of come to terms with. You have to get a grasp on in order to move through the work, because it is a key and pivotal concept that she works with. So, and it's very difficult. It's kind of in order to grasp the understanding, you have to definitely work with it. So she says the asili is the logos of the culture. Now, which is various aspects cohere or mingle together. It's the germ and the cultural essence. It's the ideological core, the matrix, which must be identified in order to make sense of the cultural collection, collective creations of its members. So there's a few questions that actually reading the work of this time made me see that I had to define. I read the work over 20 years ago while I was still a teenager and trying to come to terms with the world. And so, of course, I skipped over things that I didn't know and understand, underline and define things. But even then, I didn't understand stuff. So I'm coming back to it now. And here are some questions I had just about this one statement. So what does logos mean? What does ideological core mean? And what is the matrix of a cultural entity? These are questions that I felt were important to answer in order to understand what the asili was. So logos is thought. Logos is thought related to a premise or judgment. It's reasonings that people have. It's how you arrive at conclusions through premises that you've been introduced with. So it's like rational thought. It's how you think about the world, you know, and the environment that you have around you. So that's what logos is. Logos is rational thought. And the ideological core. So these are thoughts and ideas that form the core basis of a particular thought structure. So for instance, the rational ideological core, the logos ideological core structure of a Western kind of view of things is like you only live once, you don't choose your parents, or something like I'm on a different level. The concept of you only live once comes from a framework that looks at life in terms of a me only existence and not understanding the continuity of life, or the continuity of essence, the continuity of spirit. Um, so, and then when you express these phrases to people, in general conversation, I believe these expressions are accepted as truths, and then the conversation moves on. But if you express these statements to someone from an African country or someone from an indigenous country, these statements are kind of, don't make sense, because for one, when you look at the framework of the world from an indigenous perspective, we are always kind of in tune and in touch with our ancestors, known or unknown to us. And then at the same time, we are striving to become ancestors ourselves. So there is this continuity that exists in an African or indigenous framework. You can find this concept across cultures. And so it's not necessarily part of the ideological core of indigenous cultures, but it is an ideological core concept in Western cultures and in a Western frame of mind. And so this also leads to the experience that many people have, that we're having right now, in reference to how this philosophy or how this ideology is interacting with the world and destroying this world. Like these phrases, you only live once, so you have to live to the fullest, live life now, exploit and enjoy the resources of the earth. As a result, what we see happening is an unsustainable environment being created on this planet, which will not destroy the planet, but make it extremely uncomfortable for humans to be. So now we want to deal with the matrix of a cultural entity. So what is a matrix? That's what I wanted to kind of describe or define. So according to Merriam-Webster's dictionary, it's something within or from which something else originates. So it is the cocoon of a thing. It is the developmental area of a thing. So it is that nurturing environment from which a thing springs forth. So the cultural matrix will be the rational thoughts and ideas that develops into an ideological core that births an entity, from that entity's development of a culture. So a cultural entity is formed by two words, or wards. Man, seriously, I didn't do some editing. So cultural, of or related to culture, the customary beliefs, social forms, and material traits of a racial, religious, or social group. I also want to add to that, culture is all of the rational development of a people in their interactions with nature in regards to the 9 major areas of social activity, including economics, education, entertainment, labor law, religion, politics, sex, and war. So that would entice and entail what a culture would be. So an entity is a being in existence. So the matrix of a cultural entity is the interconnected ideas of a culture that forms a thought basis for an individual. So that's what the asili is. The asili is not necessarily even thought per se, but it is energy that has been formed, that gives rise to thought, gives rise to ideas based upon interactions that they've had with their environment. So the Utumawazo, this is very interesting, but the Utumawazo is culturally structured thought. It is the way in which cognition is determined by a culture. It is the way in which the thought members of the culture must be patterned if the asili is to be fulfilled. So the members of the culture all produce the same thoughts. You know, the members of a culture feel as if though you are supposed to do this, you are supposed to do that at a certain age, at a certain time in life. This is the way that things are supposed to be. So this means that the asili is an unconscious energy force formed by the collective thoughts of the members of a culture. This collective thought produces an energy matrix out of which thoughts emerge that support the maintenance, growth, and development of the asili. These are the thoughts of the members of the culture. So the asili is unformed consciousness, the collective ideological energy, and the utamawazo is the asili energy in thought and form. So the utama rojo is the force of a culture set in motion by the asili. It's the thrust, our energy source of a culture, that which gives us emotional tone and motivates the collective behavior of its members. So the utama wazu is the thoughts. The utama rojo would be like the feelings that give birth to the actions. So here's a good example of the asili, utama wazu, utama rojo. So the asili is here underground, a germ, seed, you know, and it's this is the environment. And then this first tentacle coming out of the asili will kind of be like the thoughts spreading out from the cultural entity. And then the thoughts give birth and rise to this manifestation, which we see as the sunflower. So the sunflower would be like the utama rojo. The roots would be the utama wazo, and the seed itself would be the asili. So, God, I have to really check my typing before I present things. So objectification. It's a way in which you interact in life as if though everything outside of yourself has no meaning and value in and of itself, except the meaning and value that you give it. And so then things exist for your pleasure. Things exist for your enjoyment. So in the Western form, this is the person, and then this is the thing observed, this is the thing observed, this is the thing observed. But the person himself is separate from these things. These things have no interaction or no connective reality to the person. They're all something separate, which has no basis in their reality. But in an African understanding, in an indigenous understanding, here is reality. And the observer interacting with the thing observed inside reality gives you understanding. This is a very different kind of framework because it takes into account the observer effect. It takes into account life. It doesn't put things inside a lab and test it, because nothing in life was ever grown in a lab. So materialization is the separation of spirit and matter. So this, equals a loss of spirit and the loss of meaning inside things. The spiritualization is the denial of the spiritual reality and the inability to experience spirit. Objectification is used ideologically and results in the desacralization and despiritualization of the universe. So dichotomization is the splitting of a thing into two things, and then saying one is better than the other. Essentially, it's comparing. And spirit, it's the creative force which unites all phenomena. It's the source of energy and motion. So spirit is matter. Spirit is matter on all levels of existence, from the immaterial to the material. And then you have another aspect of matter, which is consciousness, which experiences spirit. So spirituality is the understanding of the interrelationship of life. It is the understanding that existence itself has meaning, has purpose, has value. And so then you have the ability to interact and work with the universe. So in Yurugu, it's a being in Dogon mythology which is responsible for disorder in the universe. It was conceived in denial of the natural order and then acts to initiate and promote disharmony in the universe. In African cosmology, such a being is deficient in spiritual sensibility, is always in conflict because they see themselves as separate from the universe and cannot think interconnectedly and cannot think in a holistic fashion. And so, so essentially we have the process of European thought. Here we go. From you got a thinking being minus a spiritual being is a knower. The reality minus meaningful experience is a fact. And phenomenon minus the interconnecting context is the object. We'll explore some of these concepts later on. I hope you've enjoyed. Peace.